Good evening, everyone. It's Necro Thursday, and I'm here with Mike Scandato. How's it going, Mike?
I am well. As Mr. Hill said, you're listening to the Necromaniacs podcast coming at you every single Thursday. And tonight you get a Mike and Mike episode. I'm good, man. You know, bit of a 3-day weekend here. We're taping this during, not filming. You know, we're not on film. Yeah, it'll be nice to have a shortened work week for me. I know you said before this started that you were not off today.
No, I work for this fucking godless heathen company. I work in a salt mine, and they need to get the salt out for everyone. So
I guess so, man. Jeez, no President's Day for you. Yeah, man, I'm good. Mike and I hung out on Saturday night at this spot in Brooklyn, Dromedary. Where I was DJing along with Stella and a friend of hers, Jen. And it was a good time, huh, Mike?
I had a great time. And it was a full day of activity for me, actually. Earlier that day, there was a Muay Thai fight at Amazura nightclub out in Queens. And it was two guys that I train with at the gym. Both fought. They both won by stoppage. Which
great.
Is, it's a big deal. And shout out to Spider Muay Thai in Garwood, New Jersey, coming on strong.
Very cool.
Coming on strong in 2023. And then I checked you out, you and Stella and Jen, and it was a lot of fun.
Yeah, man. Thank you. Vinyl DJing, which is cool. I broke my teeth many moons ago CD DJing, and broke many great CDs, unfortunately, as well. But now DJing with vinyl, and I have quite a bit of vinyl to choose from, and hopefully the vinyl that I do DJ with doesn't suffer the same fate as a lot of those CDs did, but I'm being as careful as I can.
It looks real stressful doing that stuff, man.
I guess it can be, but once you're kind of like it, in the zone, so to speak, and you know what you're going to play next, it's less stressful,
Now let me ask you a question, man. Since I've never actually really DJ'd anything, like I half-assed did it a couple times, but it was basically just doing a playlist or something,
Right.
And let me ask you, do you have it planned out, or are you just going off the cuff?
I have it planned out to a degree that I know that I'm going to utilize everything I brought with me. I think I literally didn't use about 5 or 6 records out of all the records I brought with me, and I brought quite a few. I knew what I was going to start with, and I kind of know mentally what like the blocks are going to be. If you paid attention, stylistically, there were kind of like different blocks of music,
Sure.
But no, I don't have anything written down. Nothing's on my phone or anything like that. So I guess it's mentally, I know what I'm doing, believe it or not. I kind of know what I'm going to play, but it's not 100% prepared, but I would say it is somewhat prepared.
Yeah, it looks like a lot of moving parts with vinyl, man,
Yeah, it is. I wanted to say, so we did the Skinamaric episode the other week with me, you, and Jeff, and I have to say, it seems like it almost seems 50-50, huh? Like it seems like a good 50% of the people out there didn't like the movie. Mike, what do you think?
Yeah, you're probably right. I think it skews probably more, actually. What I mean? I think most people that I spoke to, with a few exceptions, are scratching their heads and like, what the fuck did I just see?
Right.
And Carl actually has not seen it yet as of the taping of this episode. Carl has not. I talked to him yesterday, and he's still trying to find the 1 hour and 40 minutes to set aside to watch it in one straight run.
Gotcha. Hopefully he finds that time. Carl of the Great Soul Knox podcast.
Yeah.
And speaking of podcasts, if you're a new listener, we like to give some plugs to our podcasting Horsemen of the Apocalypse, which in plain terms means buddies of ours, as they say. He's a buddy of mine. Right, Mike?
Yeah, and it is like this thing, man. It's cool. It all happened very naturally, and everyone just kind of connected over the last couple of years, and we all have a lot of the same interests. And the coolest thing about it is that we're all the one thing that we all have in common is that we're fucking cool. Number one.
Exactly. Of course we're cool. Of
We
course
like
we
cool
are.
stuff, and we're into cool things, and we're
Yeah,
cool people. You know what I mean?
absolutely. Why don't you run them down, Mr. Hill?
All right. On Monday, we have Horror Wolf 666, which is a fellow horror podcast brought to you by Brandon Legion. Brandon covers the interview sector of the horror podcasting world, and he has
Correct.
up and comers, established people, pretty much the whole gamut of guests on there. And then, of course, his fellow horsemen make guest appearances, and we do lists of like top, 666 best scary moments, things like that. And we all had our crossover episodes. Likewise, we have Tuesday is Into the Necrosphere, the best extreme music podcast on the internet. And that's Jackie Smith bringing it to you every week. And like I said, I listen to this show, and occasionally I'll listen to the Heavy Hole podcast brought to you by Big Will of Reeking Aura. And that's another good one. That's starting to gain on the podcast meter for me.
Okay.
Yeah. Wednesday is I'm my first podcast of the week is Everything Went Black, which is a very wide scope, a lot of different stuff on there: music, MMA, a lot of authors, filmmakers, artists, things like that. And of course Thursday is Necro Thursday, which is the Necromaniacs horror podcast brought to you
The
by
one you're listening to right now. That's right.
it's me, Mike Scandato, Jeff Kashid. And on Friday is Break the Apocalypse, brought to you by Mike Scandato's brother, John Draper.
That's right.
And that's also kind of an eclectic gathering of ideas too,
Yeah, definitely. It's, a mix of like comedy and social commentary, social issues. It's a cool podcast. I recommend you all check it out. How about that?
And we touched on this earlier, but Sunday is Soul Knox, brought to you by Carl Hikara. And he has a pretty wide variety of things on there too. We've all been guests on his show. He's been a guest on Everything Went Black. Like, it's a one big happy family, man. Just a bunch of guys really putting efforts, putting intention out there into the universe.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, I will be a guest on there soon. I'm taping next week, so it'll be my first time maiden voyage on the Soul Knox podcast. So it should be cool.
Have you seen anything cool? Anything of note?
Actually, I've been finally hunkering down with the reading. I'm trying to read every night now.
Definitely.
And I've been going back and forth on two things. One, the Finnish black metal book. It's this cool hardcover book that I kind of like did a soft reading of when I first got it. Maybe didn't do the full read that I wanted to do. I mean, I've had the book for about almost 3 years. But man, it is wonderful. It is like the kind of day one, well into the 20 teens history of black metal in Finland. And it's a really cool book. I recommend you pick it up. I got my copy via Hell's Headbangers, the great Hell's Headbangers distribution. I think it's still available from those guys. It's called The Devil's Cradle, The Story of Finnish Black Metal. What's the author's name there? Let me get an author name. By a name I can't pronounce because it's Finnish and I'm not going to attempt it. But it is called The Devil's Cradle, The Story of Finnish Black Metal. The guy's first name is Tiro. The last name, nope, not gonna attempt it. Really cool book. And it kind of goes almost like in order, like it basically starts with like Beherit and goes from there and goes into like Impaled Nazarene and you know. But you name it, they're in it. Archgoat. I mean, I believe there's even uh, a Finnish death metal book, if I'm not mistaken, as well. But this is, of course, the black metal book. Um, and aside from that, I am reading the Jason Aaron run of the Conan stuff from Marvel, Mike Hill.
Yeah, man, we talked about this briefly, I think, on Saturday,
Uh-huh.
and I have to check that out, man. Like I haven't really checked out. I mean, you and I were also discussing how Marvel gained and lost the license for Conan. So
Yeah. I mean, I guess some listeners who might be big comic people or big Conan comic people are aware of that. But, so Dark Horse Comics, of course, the great independent, company, had the Conan license for a very long time after Marvel lost it shit in the 80s or 90s. And then in the 2000s, at some point, Marvel regained its Conan license and they made a big deal out of it and they launched several books out of it. They relaunched, the regular Conan the Barbarian Monthly. They relaunched the Savage Sword of Conan Monthly, did some one shots. And now once again, as of last year, they lost Conan once again. So yeah, it's just kind of weird how all this happens. I mean, I don't know, the ins and outs of the comic world, but apparently they lost it in May of 2022. Marvel chose not to renew its Conan the Barbarian publishing rights, and yeah, kind of a weird thing. So once again, like all of your Conan kind of trades from Marvel are all kind of out of print collector's items. I mean, they're collector's items to people who want them to be collector's items, technically, right? I mean, they're never going to be for sale again.
no, no.
So, not in that form. Um, but I'm wondering, would yet another company put out these again? Like, there's got to be a point where it's like, what? Maybe we'll just start fresh. The company they lost it to was Titan.
Titan.
Titan,
Okay.
yeah. Um, so it's kind of weird. But yeah, I've been enjoying the Marvel O's, 2000s, 20 teens, whatever the fuck you want to call we're living in era. And yeah, check it out. I mean, look, nothing will be, I think, as awesome as the 70s, 80s, I think, Marvel Conan output. But to me, I think it's just fun to read almost any new Conan material now.
Yeah, pretty much, man. Like I'm all about those Roy Thomas scripted books. Like I
Mhm.
think he was like the master storyteller for that style in Marvel Comics because he did Conan, he did Cull. There was a Solomon Kane run that was like a backup feature in Savage Sword,
Mhm.
and all that stuff was all scripted by Roy Thomas, the great Roy Thomas, and that's like that's classic. That's like classic dark fantasy comics. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, they only had it back again for like 4 years and change, Mike. Isn't that weird? And
They
they to
they
lose
were
it once again.
they were in the process. I think it was like the Epic collections or whatever. They were in the process of reprinting all the old stuff again, once again, and they
Mm.
they lost the license before they actually completed their mission of reprinting everything.
Well, according to Titan, they're going to have their own archival uh, archival program of the Conan stuff, and I'm seeing you know people who were complaining last year on Twitter about please just pick up where Marvel left off and do not start over from the beginning
Yeah.
again, please. And then apparently somebody said yes, that is our plan or whatever. It's just
Oh,
kind of
that's
funny,
good.
right?
Yeah, yeah. Just for consistency purposes, just pick up where they left off for sure.
Yeah, I mean, Jesus Christmas. I mean, there's as easy as it is to find like a Marvel Conan trade. There's Dark Horse printed tons of that stuff as well. So it's you know, I think it's a little bit of a bleed of the fans to a degree. But what are you gonna do, man? I mean, these things happen. I mean, I guess Conan isn't. It's not like renewing Spider-Man. I guess,
Yeah,
unfortunately,
yeah.
right? It's not. that big of a priority.
Well, the one good thing too is Marvel did complete their reprint of Cull in
Mm,
those like deluxe format editions. I have them. It's like Cull the Destroyer, Cull the Barbarians. Like those are great stories too, and I like those stories because they're just a little bit more moodier than the Conan ones. It's
hmm
like I remember reading about how Cull and Conan, like Cull is actually more what Robert E. Howard's true personality was like,
Ah,
and
okay.
Conan was the like idealized version of who he wanted to be. You know what I mean?
Interesting.
Yeah, yeah. Like I like I have like tons of backstory about Robert E. Howard. I have the collection of all the letters that he and H.P. Lovecraft wrote to each other, and
Is there a book about him that you would recommend, or have you read a book about
yes,
him in
yes.
particular?
I'm not gonna. I want to say Sun and Steel, but that's a Yukio Mishima book. It's like
Mm,
something Thunder and Steel, Steel and Thunder, something like that. The title
uh-huh.
escapes me, but it's a biography about Robert E. Howard. That's really, really good.
Yeah, that I would like to check out at some point.
Yeah,
Definitely.
yeah, totally.
But yeah, aside from that, enjoying that Last of Us every week. I watched last night's episode, which I thought was really cool. Are you keeping up with it?
Yeah, man. Last night's episode, I don't know. It's like I'm not going to say what happens in it, but I'm like, this might be the pivotal moment where they jump. You know what I mean? I don't know.
Oh no, really? So you
We'll see what next week's like. You know what I mean?
Well, yeah. I mean, it ended on a cliff. We're not going to spoil it. It was a cliffhanger, kind of shocking ending there. And then when they showed what next week's episode looked like, I myself was like, "Ooh, what is that?" So I guess we'll see.
My read on that was those are flashbacks to Ellie when
Her
she.
earlier life,
Yes, that's
perhaps.
what I.
Okay,
Yes, that's what
okay.
I think that's what it is. Who knows? You know what I mean?
I
We'll
hope
find
so.
out. We'll find out.
Yeah. I mean,
I mean,
That's all we're gonna say.
I'm still on board, still intrigued. I still think it's a great show, and but we'll see, man. We'll see what happens. You know what I mean?
Whew.
For me, I caught the Outwaters on Friday.
Oh
Uh,
yeah, that's right.
yeah, I did not. My plan was to see it in the movie theater, but it ended on Thursday because it went exclusive on Screenbox. Now, like,
Hmm.
I hung on to Screenbox for one more month specifically to watch this. You know what I mean?
Okay.
In case I didn't get the chance to check it out in a theater, right? What a fucking mistake, man.
Uh-oh.
That's all I'm gonna say, man. It's I don't know if this is something we're gonna talk about at some point. I mean, maybe we should. I think it
Mm.
would be a service out there to our listeners to cover this show, this movie rather. But
Okay.
I don't know, man. I don't really have too many good things to say about it. Just as a precursor to
So
the.
it is so as a brief statement, you will say you enjoy Shutter better, as you'll say. Will you say that?
I pretty much think Shudder's the spot to watch horror. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
Screenbox has mostly the same stuff. It has some exclusive material on there, like Terrifier 2 is exclusive on that. There was
Hmm.
History of the Occult, which was an excellent Lovecraftian horror film. It sounds like a documentary, but it's actually a narrative, which is excellent.
Hmm.
And then this, which is like definitely a miss. You know what I mean?
Mm.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Oh, one thing Stella and I watched, and we just kind of put it on randomly, was a 2018 joint, which you know, I didn't see in 2018. About Agatha Christie's The ABC Murders with John Malkovich, where Malkovich plays Hercule Poirot, the great detective.
Okay.
And if you like thriller detective stuff set in like in the 1930s, like pre World War II England, it's pretty fucking cool. I have
Yeah,
to
I like
say.
stuff like that. Definitely.
So yeah, it's called the ABC Murders. I think it's a three-parter. We watched the first part, and yeah, I actually thought it was really fucking cool.
Yeah.
Um, it's it's I think if you're a fan of giallos, you would definitely like this, even though it doesn't really have like the giallo traits per se, but it has the thriller vibe, and like it has like the murders, and blood and that kind of stuff. But yeah, the ABC murders, pretty cool.
That sounds interesting.
Yeah. Um, but yeah, I mean, I think I'm enjoying reading like the trades again. Like I have like a whole bunch of them to fucking read. And I think that's what I'm going to do when I'm not kind of watching movies or TV stuff.
Yeah, I always try to read for at least maybe 20 or 30 minutes a day. And then, like,
Mm,
on the weekends, it's like I usually, sometimes I'll read for like 3 or 4 hours on the weekends.
very cool. Yeah, I could benefit from that habit, so to speak. But tonight, listeners, we're taking you to the 90s. We haven't been to the 90s in quite some time, Michael, right?
Yeah, I mean, the 90s was kind of almost like a no man's land for horror films. You know what I mean?
Mm.
In a lot of ways, it was like a transitional period. It was this limbic space between the 80s and the stuff that was about to pop off in the new millennium.
I agree. I think there's sprinklings in the very beginning of the 90s. Your Bram Stoker's Draculas,
Yeah.
and you get the sprinklings at the end, your Event Horizons, right? And you could say your Scream is the very end of well, is it the very, no, it's not. I think it's the middle.
Yeah, that's like mid
That's when
90s.
that's okay. Let me walk that back. That's when things kind of start to get bad, but you have your sprinklings, I think, in the 90s of decent horror. But what was happening in the 90s were the it was a decade of I would call it the edgy indie films. Mike, would you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. And similar to tonight's feature that we're discussing, you know.
Absolutely. One could make a slight argument that the movie we're covering tonight is a horror film due to the fact that it covers all of the horrific things of real life. Mike, no, would you say that?
Well, it, you know that film Combat Shock?
Hmm.
People consider that a horror film.
Yeah, I mean, look, I'll say tonight's movie is not a horror film, but it is a Necromaniacs podcast film. How about
Yeah.
that?
Well, I would like to liken it to Buddy Giovanazzo's opus Combat Shock, which
Okay,
some people
okay.
consider that a horror film, but there's nothing supernatural about it. It's just about like post-traumatic stress disorder, and there's this similar brooding taxi driver-esque tone to that film as well.
Yeah, this movie is for our fans of Taxi Driver, our fans of Hardcore, George C. Scott, Hardcore, remember? We
Yeah.
covered that.
Yep.
Our fans of 8 millimeter, right? It is a little ditty called God's Lonely Man, released in January of 1996 from director Francis von Zernick. It is an American film, shot and takes place in Los Angeles, right, Mike?
It does. However, it has a very East Coast feel to it, though, doesn't it?
Actually, I mean, a little, but a lot of people have, I think, in online commentary referred to it as the West Coast Taxi Driver, though.
Yeah, but I'm talking about just the characters. You know what I mean? Like you got,
Yeah.
you know what I mean?
Okay.
Like,
Hmm.
the guy. Well, let's run down the cast real quick. And there's some surprising people in this film for such a sleazy ass movie as this. There's some
Indeed.
pretty well established actors are in it. You know,
Hmm.
the star is Michael Weil or Wiley. I'm not even sure how to
Michael
pronounce it.
Wiley.
Michael
I would say
Wiley.
Michael. Yeah.
He plays Ernest. And then there's Heather McComb, who plays Christiane Birch.
Heather McComb was in several episodes of Ray Donovan. And if you looked her up on IMDb, she's basically in an episode or two of everything ever made
Yeah.
on television.
Very prolific actress.
Yeah, a woman who's been on every TV show under the sun, and who at one point was married to James Vanderbeek, actually. So yeah, there's
And
that too.
I also want to call this, and this is significant, that she's from Barnegat, New Jersey, too.
Yeah, she's a Jersey girl, and you could almost kind of tell in this movie that she's an East Coast girl, in my
Well,
opinion.
and that's kind of, well, I'm going to get to that. You know what I mean?
Okay,
Yeah.
got it, got it.
We got Roxana Zal as Nikki Birch, her mother.
Hmm.
The great Justine Bateman as Meredith, the daughter of the porno movie book place,
Hmm. The porn shop, porn
the
shop.
porn shop. J.C. Quinn as Stephen, the owner of the porno shop, and J.C. Quinn's
Hmm.
been in a ton of stuff too.
Hmm.
The late great Tom Towles as Stephen,
Yes.
once again playing like a grimy, one of the grimiest characters you can imagine. And of course, Tom
Yeah,
Towles is in Henry Portrait of a Serial Killer.
that's right.
He plays Otis. Paul Dooley, who you'll know from 16 Candles.
Yeah, the dad in 16 Candles, and a man who's, to me, played just, kind of positive people
Yeah,
in
very
movies, would
wholesome
you
guy.
say?
Very wholesome.
Very
Yeah,
wholesome, playing a very dark, unwholesome role as the character Polo in this film.
yeah. And Kiernan Mulrooney as Keith,
Hmm.
another super creep in this film. Yeah.
Yes.
We have a cameo of Ginger Lynn, the famous porno actress,
Yeah,
as a
Ginger Lynn Allen. Yeah,
yeah.
whom I met at a chiller, and she couldn't have been nicer and cooler and funnier. She's, yeah, nice woman.
Yeah. So what I wanted to bring up though is particularly, I don't know where Michael Wiley's from, but
Hmm.
he looks like a guy that grew up in New York or Staten Island or something like that.
Yeah, yeah, he doesn't really look LA-ish.
No, he just looks like some Italian dude, that lives in like Brooklyn or whatever. You know what I mean?
And he himself had a small role in Tough Turf, a movie I would like to cover on the show one day with James Spader, the 1985 film. He was one of Brad's buddies in Fast Times at Ridgemont High.
Oh,
Very,
okay,
again,
all right.
very small role.
Yeah.
Bunch of TV stuff also in the 90s and O's, The Division, Joan of Arcadia. But his IMDb ends around 2008 with some TV stuff. Has not done a ton of shit overall though. This guy might not even be acting anymore. He's on a few episodes of Nash Bridges in the 90s, and you know, in the 80s he was on random episodes of Saint Elsewhere and Simon, and you know, he had a tiny role in Valley Girl, small, like I said, small role in Tough Turf, and small role in Fast Times at Ridgemont High. So there you go.
He probably owns like a car wash in Hohokus, New Jersey, right now, or like a laundromat. He took his acting money and opened up a chain of laundromats. I imagine.
He might. I mean, he's a awkward guy playing a very awkward character. Let's just say.
So I would say most of the film is the acting interplay between Michael Wiley and Heather McComb. And that's why I think this movie feels like it takes place in like Newark or something like that. You know what I mean?
I have one more cameo to shout out.
Oh, okay.
If you're a 90210 person, Jamie Walters is in this film. Jamie Walters plays one of the hustlers at the very beginning of the movie, an early scene when they're at the porn shop where Ernest works. This guy actually went on to have a pop song that was pretty big in the 90s called "How Can You Talk to an Angel." I'm not even kidding. And he's in this movie. They filmed this around 95. This is kind of the post 90210 days he was in, and the post minor hit song that he had days. So yeah, Jamie Walters is also in this movie.
So as we mentioned, this film it's basically a riff on Taxi Driver. I mean, let's just be
Yes,
straight up about it. Even
100%.
even Michael Wiley's portrayal of Ernest, everything about him screams Travis Bickle.
Yeah, it is a ode to Taxi Driver rip. I mean, 90s up, 90s up version of Taxi Driver, only in an LA setting instead of New York City. 100%. Now, Mike, before we go further, I have to ask you something.
Okay.
This movie is not really available anywhere. The DVD is out of print. It's not on Blu-ray. You've watched it on YouTube. and that is where I watched it for this show. So this is only one of literally two films in the history of Necromaniacs podcast that we watched the movie that was on YouTube only, by the way. How did you find this movie?
Oh, of course. Rennie told me about this movie. Yeah,
Of
right
course.
before. Actually, the first time I watched this, Rennie sent me the link right
Mhm.
before the Christmas holiday.
Hmm.
Right, and I was like, I was at my parents' house visiting, and I had my iPad with me. I'm like, let me go in my room and hang out
Oh
there.
my God.
So like on the Christmas weekend, I watched this on an iPad in my room and at my parents' house. So it was,
Wow.
yeah, dude. It
This
was
is not okay, folks,
no.
we're going to get it out of the way. This is not a feel good movie. This is not a Christmas movie. Ultimately, this makes Taxi Driver seem a little more quaint, in my opinion. I'm sorry. Look, Taxi Driver is the superior film. This is the darker, more harsh film. Would you agree with that statement?
Yeah, it's like a wallowing in the low life of humanity, man. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And the character of Ernest is like it's almost like this like incel version of Travis Bickle. You know?
Yeah. I just want to say thank you, Rennie, for this one because I did enjoy watching this. I guess as much as I could kind of enjoy watching it, but I don't remember this movie. I've never heard of this movie. It is something that was brand new to me, and I'm always fascinated when I hear about these movies either from the 70s, 80s, or 90s that are new to me, that are kind of like these dark, oddball, fucked up movies. So thank you, Mr. Rennie.
Well, you know what? Too, it's in Taxi Driver, like even though that's a dark film, the way it's portrayed, like everything seems very cool. Like you kind of want to check out that world a little bit. You know what I mean? It's you don't want to live there. You
Mm.
want to visit. You want to give it a drive by, like the world of Travis Bickle and like
Yeah, I mean everybody's
1970s.
enamored. Everybody's enamored by 70s New York and yada yada yada. Um, but this is, yeah, I think, okay. Also, I'll put it out there. I do think this is a Necromaniacs podcast film. However, I think only a sector of the Necromaniacs listeners will enjoy this film. I think this may end up being a bit too much for even some of our listeners as we get to the end of the film, Mike.
Yeah, I mean, and there is a sense of realism to this film too, and it's there's nothing about the world that Ernest lives in that seems romantic at all. Like how like people romanticize, like we were saying, 70s New York City.
Mm-hmm.
You don't want to be in any of these neighborhoods that this guy's in. You know,
No.
even they have a shot of where the porno store that he's working at in the beginning is located, and it's like not even like on a main drag. It's not even like on Sunset Boulevard or something like that. It's like in this industrial side street with like these fucked up looking buildings around it and everything, and it's like wow, what a weird place to put a porno book store. There's like hardly any foot traffic. There's just like the assortment of creeps and prostitutes and scumbags that just seem to be in that neighborhood all the time.
To make things even a little more interesting is that this director, Francis von Zernick, never directed an actual film ever again. Um, the other credit he has, which is something I'm definitely going to seek out, is a short from 2011 called The Family Down the Lane.
Oh yeah, I read that on his IMDb actually.
And the little write up on that is Pilates loving mother of two daughters living in San Fernando Valley comes home one afternoon to find a deranged man with his odd wife and drug addict daughter living in their house. The families make an attempt to make sense of the situation, ultimately have an altercation with the neighbor. It all goes to hell. So I want to see that. And I like how this director used the down the lane, which to me is, I bet the farm, a callback to Little Girl Who Lives Down the Lane, a movie which we covered right here on Necromaniacs podcast. So I will look for this 2011 short. Um, so yeah, it's an outlier film from an oddball, you know, director who was kind of almost never heard from ever again, with a star that again hasn't done anything in a long time, but for some fucking reason has Justine Bateman from Family Ties in it. How about that as a head scratcher?
Exactly. And this came out in '96, so she
Mm-hmm.
was like a fairly well-known actress at the time.
Yeah, I mean, but by '96, Family Ties is done and done. I think Family Ties finally ends at the very beginning of the '90s. And this was definitely shot in '95. Um, so I don't know what her career was like back then. Um, it's just like, I mean, Mike and I are not 100% sure if this played in many theaters in '96 or it was more of a just film festival / went right to home video fair. If anyone can let us know that has a recollection of seeing this in the theater at some point, after you've heard this episode, definitely let us know on Instagram or Facebook. Um, Part of me thinks that this might have had a super duper limited run theatrically, perhaps in California, and then went to video and I think had an early O's DVD, and then just completely has faded into obscurity because yeah, it is on YouTube, and it is definitely, I would say, an unedited version. It looks like a DVD rip onto YouTube, Mike.
Basically, I think you're right. And anyone out there is interested in this, watch it right away, because who knows how long it's going to be up on YouTube until they take it down
Right.
because there's like really inappropriate language in this movie, and
Yes.
like very very not of the times language, references to things that I'm not gonna say, but
Yes, this seems like something that YouTube would do a victory dance at the headquarters for taking off YouTube. I got to be completely honest. In 2023. So I almost feel like, Mike, you're right that this probably has an expiration date on it.
yeah.
Honestly, to watch this movie. There's a lot of N bombs. There's a lot of F bombs. Uh, and that is as much as I'm going to say about the language of this movie. I mean, hell, the '90s might as well have been the '70s, Michael. Huh?
I mean, there was actually no nudity in this though.
You're right. For the subject matter, which we'll get into, which delves into, pornography, child pornography, snuff films, and just overall depravity, there is no nudity in this film. Yes.
Oh,
Interesting.
real quick about the director. He also was an actor, and he,
Hmm.
he acted in a film called Dark Secrets, but he
Interesting.
had a different name though. His, his name was Frank von Zurich.
I Hey, I am going to look up this down the lane short. There was a little snippet of it because sometimes now when you're on IMDb, you actually get to see like the trailers almost pop right up. The trailer of God's Lonely Man on IMDb pops right up as you're looking at the page. So I actually got to see a bit of the trailer for his short from 2011, and it looked kind of cool. So, um, but yeah, wow. Uh, I guess once I get a hold of Rennie, I'll be like, "How did you find this movie?" Because I bet you he found it in the
He
'90s.
probably
You
has
know,
he probably has the DVD.
he probably,
I guarantee you he has this.
yeah, exactly. Um, so yeah, we have a very lonely protagonist, hence the God's Lonely Man. But honestly, I mean, I would say that Von Zernick was so inspired by Taxi Driver that he took that line, the God's Lonely Man line
Yeah, and
in
that's
in,
that's
in Taxi Driver.
and they have like that excerpt from the Thomas Wolfe story,
Right,
which is
exactly.
also known as the Anatomy of Loneliness.
Mm.
Yeah.
Now, listeners, there's not a Wikipedia page for this movie. There's not a bloody disgusting article. There's not a morgue article. There's not much at all. There is a Rotten Tomatoes entry, and on the IMDb entry under the user reviews, which can be very helpful. I feel like because sometimes you find out inside things in these user reviews. There are 13 reviews, and I will say almost all of them are 8, 9s, and 10s out of 10s, Michael, about this movie,
I'm not
about how
surprised,
people
man.
enjoyed this movie,
Yeah, no, it's
which is almost shocking. Um, there's one person that has a 1 out of 10. This is worst movie ever. And then another 1 out of 10 that's just too much like Taxi Driver. But literally all of the other ones rate this movie extremely high, um, which I was almost a little surprised by. But ultimately, look, this is a movie that goes into very, very dark places, much like the original Taxi Driver does. But it doesn't have the luck of being directed by Martin Scorsese and having, Paul Schrader involved and having the wonderful score and the wonderful cinematography. It's almost like if you remove all of that and you put it in a 90s West Coast setting, I almost feel like then you have what you have here. You know what I'm saying? Like, which honestly, look, the 90s are regarded by lots of people, myself included, as a pretty wonderful time. But I do think it in the early 90s, you had similarities to the 80s. And look, society hadn't really advanced all that much just yet. And I think there was just probably just as much dark shit in the 90s going on as there was in the 70s and 80s. But I feel like the general consensus is that it wasn't, Mike. No?
it's hard to say because I think I in my travels in the '90s, I think I saw more dark stuff in the '90s than I
Yeah,
did in
well,
the
well, this
'80s.
is early 90s. Early 90s, as we have talked about on the show, well, early mid. This is smack dab in the mid 90s. Um, I feel like in the early 90s, yeah, myself as like a young early 20s, late teens person, I was reading all the serial killer books. That's what I was doing,
Right. Yeah.
in like 92, 93, 94. Honestly, by 95, 96, I was actually reading tons of like vampire stuff and Poppy Z. Bride and like just kind of more crazy, horror stuff. Um, but now that I think about it, I also think around this time is when I found some of that the real oddball stuff. Oh man, what were those books called?
Want to answer me?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. Like,
Jim
well, Answer
Toad.
Me ended in 94, but I feel like its wavelength is reached still in 95 and 96. And, there's definitely some, dark corners that are being found by people back then that I don't know. I just feel like some people don't think of the 90s, they think of Friends or they think of grunge.
Well, let
Like
me
they
let
might
me
not think of
let me let
this,
me let me run this by you. I can imagine that store See Here carrying this DVD.
Yeah, but you're
You know what
right.
I'm trying to say?
Or having like a zine that talked about this movie. Oh
Yeah,
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 like
yeah,
and See Here is a now defunct, very very freewheeling bookstore,
yeah.
mag store, magazines that had every possible thing you can imagine, everything, any kind of. You can buy like a White Power like newsletter there.
Yeah.
There was like the Nambla books were there. There was like anything went, and the guy who ran it was like this like leftist like hippie
Yeah,
progressive dude. He just believed.
because it was all about free speech.
Yeah,
It was all about, you know, what I'm saying? Like I do what I want and I sell what I want and blah blah blah. Like, yeah, I mean, it was just such a different time.
yeah,
But
and
now that
that
I'm thinking about it, regarding like, look, like porn shops in the mid '90s, I mean, they were still kind of in full force, actually.
I mean,
Um,
even into the 2000s, like porno shops. I just saw one actually in Manhattan.
wow.
I walked by one on like 20, like maybe 22nd or something like that, and like
Yeah, they're
Seventh or
still
Eighth
there.
Avenue, like in that area.
They're like these. It's like you see, you're like, holy shit, this still exists. But I mean, there needs to be a few sprinkled about. I mean, it's just how life is.
But I guess this the mention of See Here bookstore like that is like the world of God's lonely man. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Oh yeah,
It's
I see what you're saying. I
yeah,
see what you're
it's like yes, this movie will offend many people because of the subject matter that's discussed in this film. You know, but that's not my fault. You know what I mean? You can't blame me and Mike for telling you about
No,
this, and that's
no.
exactly the stance that the dude who owns See Here has, and that's what I'm trying to say about this movie. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I actually got some like satanic zines from there, and
Yeah.
like early black metal zines,
Yep.
and
Exit magazine.
hardcore
Yeah.
zines, and it's it was a great time. But anyway, back to the movie itself. I mean, we have to talk about how Ernest goes on to meet Christiane, which I'm gonna say, and I don't know this for a fact. I bet the farm that Christiane is named after Christiane F. What about you?
One of my favorite movies. I was
Yeah.
thinking the same exact thing because essentially, and we'll let it out of the bag now. Christiane is a teenage prostitute.
Yep.
You know,
And you drug user,
drug user.
prostitute.
Everyone's using drugs in this movie. Everyone.
Yeah, yeah. And she is 14 years old, and she keeps saying, "I'm almost 15. I'm almost 15." I will say this: Heather McComb at the time of filming this was a 19-year-old. So
Yeah,
thank God for that.
I looked that up too. I wanted.
Yeah,
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 because there are
definitely.
some very there's compromising language, there's compromising scenes, and um, I mean, her character talks very openly about the things that she's done, right?
Yeah,
There's a lot of that, but thank God, obviously, she's being played by a 19-year-old. Because dude, by like 95, there would have been no way in fucking hell they would have let an actual teen play a role like this. Definitely not.
no,
Obviously,
definitely. I mean, Jodie Foster was what fucking 13 when
she
she
was
was.
like 13 or 14, but her mom was there on the set, and I mean, honestly, little girl who lives down the lane, no stage mom now would let their fucking
No, hell
14-year-old
no.
play that movie.
Yeah,
But Jodie Foster's mother was there at all times. And while look, there's that bizarro nude scene that isn't her, that's her older sister in the movie. Uh, that movie is edgy as fuck, and it to me, it'll forever be a very like eyebrow kind of raising movie. You know,
yeah,
but anyway, Um, but it's weird though. She's played by a 19-year-old actress, but man, I think she comes across as someone who's almost 15 years old, in my opinion. Like she plays very
yeah.
young, you
Well,
know?
I was going to comment that I think she's probably the best actor in the entire production, except for maybe Tom Towles. But I mean, like she really does carry that role. And like
Yeah,
I was going
yeah.
to ask, it's like when as a grown man, when you interact with young people,
Mhm.
like they just seem incoherent half of the time.
Right.
And I think that Heather McComb really portrays that. Like
Yeah,
she's
like she's
very,
very
very
kind of like
authentic.
skittish.
Yeah.
Like she's kind of skittish and a little all over the place, and she's kind of always kind of like laughing and happy. And it very like one of the most fucked up things about this movie is how even when she's describing like the horrible things she's done and the horrible things she has seen, Mike, she describes it in a way that it's coming from a 14-year-old. And
Yes.
it just makes it more uncomfortable. No?
It's super, super brutal. Yeah, because it's like spoken in. It's like when you watch documentaries about people who've been abused. Like
Mm.
it's very much like that's what I mean. The movie is. It gave me chills at times because of those scenes.
Yes.
And
And you know what? If you're look, you know, I would preface this with if you are triggered by shit like this, I don't think this is your movie.
no, definitely not.
If you're triggered by frank discussions of, abuse, uh, this is probably not the movie for you. Um, but again, as Mike said, she is the best actress in the movie, Heather McComb. I'm sorry. Like she's, uh, and I would bet that, her mother or father or whoever was obviously on set for a movie like this. And, I bet it was probably real interesting for her as a young actress to make a fucking movie like this. No?
Yeah, because even it's just like it's very believable, and I think she really did a great job acting. And most of the film is her and Michael Wiley acting together, and there's
Yeah.
definitely an energy there, which I thought, and I'm going to say it right now too. I think that the writing on this is fucking great. The dialogue, everything, man. It's like this is definitely a sleazy movie for sure.
It is sleazy. And I don't know if I would throw the director under the bus that he made this for titillation,
No,
because
no.
I do not think that is the case. I don't think that's the case. But we have such little to go on this movie that all we have is our fucking opinions and speculation, Mike. You know what I'm saying? I think maybe the guy was super into Taxi Driver, and it's nearly 20 years later, and he's putting it in mid 90s, in the mid 90s world, the mid 90s setting, and the horrors of what's going on in the mid 90s, which, let's be honest, are similar to the horrors of what was going on in mid 70s Manhattan, New York City, right?
Sure, yeah.
Uh, you know, and it's like how things don't really change. I mean, yeah, maybe he just wanted to make an update in his town or whatever of Taxi Driver. Maybe he wanted to say something a little more. Who the fuck knows? We don't fucking know.
Well, I kind of feel like he movie is very similar to Taxi Driver. Like we established that, but it tells a different story, really. You know what I mean? It really is more about abuse, where Taxi Driver was more about insanity. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Although Travis and Taxi Driver, once he befriended and really got to know Jodie Foster and care about her as almost like a father figure, he wanted to exact his revenge on the people in her world. And obviously, cat out of the bag, Ernest does and wants to do the same thing for the people who have wronged Christiane.
Right, but unlike Jodie Foster's character in Taxi Driver, she's away from her family, and her family are not abusing her. In Christiane's family, she's living with her mom. She's got a stepdad played by Tom Towles, Steven, and that's the difference in the characters, is that she's living at home being abused, and she's on the streets and addicted to drugs and booze and everything. She's going to AA meetings. It's like her character, that element of the story is way more developed than in Taxi Driver. You know what I mean? Like you get a real insight into what she's coping with. You know?
Yeah, I have to say there's an interesting depiction of an AA meeting in this movie that to me reminds me of what an AA meeting is really like, actually. So I thought the director might know a bit about that.
Yeah.
For putting that scene in there. Frances von Zernick, which I thought was interesting, which is where we get to see Ginger Lynn Allen have her speaking role. And, she is, I guess, trying to clean up her life a bit by going to these meetings, because she's going to the meetings because her mom is a raging alcoholic.
Yeah.
She herself is a drug user / teen prostitute, going there with her friends who are also teen prostitute drug users. It's kind of interesting scenes there, no?
And also, you really see the ravages of that, of even with Ernest, because Ernest is also a drug addict. He's like doing coke and whatever, and
crack. He's doing crack. And
yeah. And there's an interesting scene where when he first meets Christiane, where she wants him to light a cigarette for her, and he pulls out his lighter and it's got that fucking huge flame on it.
Yeah, for crack pipes.
And she's like, "Whoa!" Like he's, I just like.
Why is your flame so high? Yes.
That I meant to ask you if that's what. It's for smoking crack, basically.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
It's dark, fucking dark stuff, man. Really.
Yeah, very dark stuff.
And so you see him in the grips of like withdrawal, and he's like all paranoid. And with Travis Bickle, he's just psychotic. You know what I mean? Like he has emotional problems. He's not so much a drug addict, but in this film, everyone is dealing with drug addiction.
Yeah.
You know, I mean,
Um, just want to put it out there. Justine Bateman, her role in this movie is Meredith. She is a co-worker of Ernest when Ernest is working at the video store where he ultimately loses his job. Meredith's dad owns the video store. So Justine Bateman's character is only at the beginning of the film. Uh, Initially, Ernest is kind of normal around her. You could tell that he likes her, but he's, polite and says the right thing. Until the one day, well, he gets a little dressed up nicer and walks into the video store to talk to her and just says every single wrong thing you can say to a woman, huh, Mike?
yeah, basically, yeah. And she's like, "Is this how you think you're supposed to talk to a woman?" You know, and like,
And she's very surprised by it because I think initially she did think he was okay and liked
yeah,
him. And she was so creeped out and weirded out by all the weird, creepy things he said to her, which he does if you watch the film. She tells her dad, who owns the store, and the dad walks Ernest outside and ultimately fires him from the store. And we don't see Justine Bateman's character again or the video store owner again. Um, it's funny how you use the word incel, and yeah, he almost comes across as an adult virgin who happens to smoke drugs and like just be like a hot mess, and who's into impersonating police and having guns, and it's yeah. I mean, he could be a virgin. I mean, I don't know if the character was a virgin, but he's so awkward around women and seems to have absolutely no idea how to interact with them until he gets to know the very young Christiane. And while he is a little weird to her, he is not coming on to her sexually. Would you agree?
yeah, just the opposite, actually. I mean, he doesn't have that kind of energy around her, you know, and he off throughout the film he comments on how young she is, and there's a scene where he's like, "I'm 28 years old and you're 14," and she's like,
Yeah,
"Well,
yeah. She
I'm
tries to
almost."
kiss him. She tries to kiss him, and she tries to lay on top of him, and he just pushes her off. And yeah, he knows that there's a line. You know what I'm saying? As nutty as he is with his drug taking and his disillusions and this and that, yeah, he knows that she's a 14-year-old. So there is some morality in this movie, Mike.
But everything's like damaged, though. You know what I mean? Because even all right, we determined that she's living in an abusive house. You know, she's got her alcoholic mother who's not taking care of her. Her sister's missing, and she's got Otis Toole as her stepdad.
Yeah.
And so he comes up with this idea to impersonate a police officer to basically abduct her out of her parents' house or her mom's house.
Yes, that's a wild scene.
Yeah. And that's kind of like, so he brings her back to his place, and he's like, "Well, I'm going to stay in a hotel room. You can stay here." And she's like, "You can't leave me here alone." And that's when there's that incident where you see that, okay, he's a lot of things, but he is not a statutory rapist, which we determined.
Yeah, because honestly though, like, I mean, since I didn't see the movie, I almost was like, oh man, he's taking her out of there. Is he taking her out of there because he wants to like fool around with her? But no, he takes her out of there because he knows her home life is hell and that she doesn't want to be there.
Yeah.
You know?
It's
Right.
like the one good thing he's done is that. And even that is still breaking laws and against,
Yeah, it's still
illegal.
weird.
Yeah, it's still very weird.
Yes. Oh man. Um, so Christiane reveals to him a bunch of stuff about, her life and the things she's seen and right and the things she's done. And she proceeds to describe to him about someone's home that she's been in where she has partaken in just some really dastardly stuff, and that a bunch of other children have partaken in this fucking despicable stuff. And he kind of remembers all the details, right? Of everything she tells him and everybody's name and this and that and what's inside the house and what's, there's AC/DC posters on the walls and a punching bag. And later on in the movie, when we get to this place, we get to see that she described everything to a T, right?
And yeah, it's this den of pedophiles basically. And
Yes.
Tom Towles, her stepfather, is part of this crew of men who make films
Hmm.
and also abuse children, you know.
And aside from, pedophilia, it's snuff films as well.
Yeah. So Ernest sort of finagles his way in through this guy Keith, who's like a little league coach of all things.
Yeah, like that's the thing, man. This movie hits some marks, man, with about like the baseball coach thing and the
Yeah.
stepdad thing and
It's all the
it
things you're
just
afraid of that you as a parent,
yeah,
if you were
it really goes there. You
yeah,
know what I'm saying?
it plays on every single fear that a parent has about their kids when they're out in the world, like who's taking care of their kids. In the case of this guy Keith, he's a pedophile and he's a little league coach. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's why. Like again, we're gonna put it out there again. I don't know if everybody listening is gonna be down for this movie, Mike. So nobody get mad at me and Mike. We didn't direct the movie, okay?
Yeah, we're just we believe in free speech, and this is
Yeah, I mean, look, again, this show has covered edgy films before. We will continue to cover edgy films and films that are, that kind of stay with you. And hell, there have been movies in the past that I've said I'm never going to watch ever again. And there are movies, again, it runs the gamut. But yeah, I'm putting a trigger warning out of this movie. That's what I'm doing.
That's a wise choice.
As a good podcast host.
So this scene coming up when he finagles his way into this house, and this whole plot is to get to basically murder everyone because of the abuse and her stepfather, and he wants a
revenge.
Free Christiane of this, and possibly even find out where her sister is too. Now,
yes,
yeah.
Christiane has a sister who has been missing for a while, and honestly, it's like I was thinking to myself, God knows what. I mean, she might even not even be alive.
Yeah. Now this is like the most. This is the scene that I was so uncomfortable when I watched this scene coming up the first time. Like I just.
I almost turned the movie off.
It was like
I almost turned it off.
Yep. I couldn't. It was so tense and Tom Towles. You get this guy in a scene, and he just pushes. He just you're at 11 with him. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I'm gonna say like it's Serbian film-esque levels. No?
Yeah. The worst part about it is the feeling out process that they go through. Like when they first meet each other. Keith brings Ernest into this house, and Steven, aka Tom Towles, is there, and they're just checking him out, and they're saying all this stuff like, you're right, I like him. He's a good guy. He's a very nice man. They're talking about Polo.
The use of good guy, nice man.
Yeah, a lot of this.
Cool,
He's like, and then like Ernest goes to like put his hands on Steve, and he's like, don't touch me, man. I don't know you. Don't touch me.
I know.
And I'm just like, oh my God, something happened. Like
I
please.
know. It gets real tense. It got real tense.
And then, but they're all like, there's like this sense of. Like, it's all in Tom Towles' eyes, like the restraint, because all you see, when you look into his eyes, you just see violence.
Yeah.
And he's restraining himself throughout this whole scene. And he's like, even when he's looking at Keith after Ernest tries to touch him, he's like, you're right. I like him. And I'm
it's like, wow. Man.
So then in comes Polo. All right, and he was to make things to really establish who he is. He describes this really horrible thing with
like seeing this kid running and going jogging, and when he walked in, I went, "Oh my God, it's Molly Ringwald's dad, 15 Candles, and he's a disgusting pedophile." And it's like, Jesus Christ, this movie goes. I'm just gonna say it goes to the places that you don't think it's gonna go,
and it's all done with dialogue too.
All dialogue,
and that's why, and that's a strength, man. Like that's the strength of the writing. It's all done with dialogue, and acting and good acting. Okay.
And then what's going through my head, man, watching a scene like that is like, is that what it's like with these people? Like, dude. Imagine, like, wow, man, to me, it's something out of a movie for me because it's something that I can't fathom. Like, you
I
know?
I mean, if you it's like the heaviest thing about the scene was like you're at this like bird's eye view of this like interaction between these guys who were literally doing they're involved in like the most despicable, lowest thing you could possibly be involved with, and they're
Yeah,
just
demonic. It's demonic.
and they're trying
Like
to
truly
figure
demonic.
out. They're trying to feel each other out, and all right, shit, is this guy on the level? You know, is this guy? You know, what's his deal? You know, like this is a strange dude. Like the other three guys know each other. They all know that they're scumbags. You know what I mean? They're like,
Mm.
we all done this before together. We know that we're both like these fucking slimy like pieces of crap. You know what I mean? But we don't know about this other guy. He's a new guy. You know,
Right.
and it's such a intense white knuckle scene, man. All great writing and great acting. Seriously, that's how I see this. You
I
know?
would agree with that. I
Yes.
would agree with that.
And yeah.
Yeah.
Now and then of course Polo, basically breaks the ice. He's like, the best scene is when Ernest goes to sit down and Polo's like, no, sit over here next to me. Like, he's like, us short eyes can tell we can pick each other out. You know what I mean? And they use the term short eyes.
Yeah. Oh my God. Like,
Yeah.
man, was that a factoid I didn't want to learn, and now I've learned it.
Well,
and I can't
that's
remember.
they kind of got it, the way he described it. That's a jailhouse term, short eyes.
Yes, I feel like I've heard is that a move? Like I've heard that word or term used in a movie.
Well,
Maybe?
there's a movie called Short Eyes, which is
Mm.
about a child molester in jail,
Ah, okay.
and that's how I discovered the term. There's a song by Killdozer called Short Eyes,
Oh,
and then they in True Detective they reference Short Eyes.
oh yeah. It's a 1977 film
Yeah,
called Short Eyes. It's like a prison movie.
yeah, it's a
Wow.
prison
Okay.
movie. Yeah,
You know, I'd always seen this box cover. Oh, Bruce Davison is in this.
yep,
I never knew what the fuck this movie was about. That's what this movie is about? Jesus Christ.
yeah. It's
Mike,
definitely.
here's the storyline. Young man who was charged with child molestation placed in New York City's infamous Tombs prison,
Yep.
Tombs.
Yeah.
While the other inmates in his cell block find out what he is charged with, life becomes extremely difficult for him. Wow.
Because
I never knew that's what that movie was about.
yeah, and as you know, like that's like the lowest rung in prison. You know, those are the guys that don't last too long in jail. You know,
Luis Guzman is in this.
he's like in every jail film he's in that. You know, Luis
And
Guzman.
Mark Margolis is in this.
Yeah.
From what do you call it? Better Call Saul and that whole world.
Yep.
Breaking Bad. Yes. Oh wow. Yeah. Interesting. But anyway, back to God's Lonely Man.
So the whole point of him being there is he described to Keith that he's interested in purchasing a film. Okay. For $1,000. Okay, it's a
Right.
5-minute film involving a very young girl.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now, of course, there's another funny scene too in the beginning where he has his money and he wants to give it to Steven.
Yeah, he's so awkward. Like he doesn't know how to do anything.
Yeah.
In a way.
And
It's so weird.
Steven's like, no, don't give it to me.
Don't get there.
And then when he goes to give the money to Polo, and Steven's like, no, I'll take it. It's like everything about it. It's like so fucking tense and like uncomfortable,
Yeah.
like all these aspects of it. So that it's the moment of truth comes, and I'm like, oh my god, man, what are they gonna fucking show us, man? You know, I don't want to see this thing. And they put the movie in, and it's like the movie's 5 minutes long, and it's basically it depicts the murder of a young girl, and you're led to believe that it's actually Christiane's sister that's killed in the film. And the murderer is Steven, the father.
Right.
Stepfather, rather. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So that's like, even though you don't see anything really, the way, like the whole, it really felt like part of your soul, like, is dirty from watching this scene. You know what I mean? Like there's something about this scene that really
I'm going to agree with you.
it
Yeah.
just gets under your skin, man. And like the way that the young girl acts, and like he even says to her as he's getting ready to kill her, he's like, "Oh, it's only a movie." But meanwhile, he fucking murders her on the screen, man. It's
Yeah.
just
Jesus Christmas. Like,
yeah,
woof.
and it's like a very unflinching, extreme viewport into like just this like horrible world, you know?
Yeah. I was I was watching and feeling very shitty and uncomfortable. And I literally barely got through that scene. I almost turned the movie off. And I like almost I did fast forward a little bit. I did. I had to fast forward through it. I had to get out of that scene. I'm not even kidding.
Yeah.
I had to get out. Yeah.
So, you know, as a result of watching this thing, you know, Ernest is like, he's like, he ends up murdering everyone in the room, you know?
Yes. He does quite a number on Polo too.
Yeah. He like digs his eyes out with his thumbs. He like, you know,
Yeah.
shoots up Keith, shoots Tom Towels, you know?
But it's like, fuck yeah, kill all these people.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
And you know, and it is it's like analogous to the Taxi Driver scene where Travis Bickle goes to spring Jodie Foster, and he's got the mohawk and the guns and everything. You know what I mean? It's not as grandiose as that, but you know, these guys have a small budget. You know.
Well, okay, he kills the bad guys, as they say. Kills the three bad guys. He gets out of there, gets back to his place, and then he shoots himself, right?
Yeah.
In the chest. Right?
Yeah, like so in the body, you know, the stomach or the chest,
right,
or
in the body,
not
right,
in the
right.
head. You know what I mean?
Not in the head, although there's a bit of a little fantasy scene, right? Little, you know, like, but he shoots himself, and then Christiane gets to the house and sees him all shot and bloodied and freaking out, and honestly, as a viewer, I thought, well, this is it. He's gonna die. The movie's gonna be over, and blah blah blah. What about you?
Yeah, I thought that was it. You know, and I'm like, okay, this probably is a good spot to end the movie. Probably a good way, you know, for the movie to end. But you know, if it had ended that way, the bad guys are dead. Ernest is dead. But Christiane, it's probably still going to go back to the streets, you know?
Yeah, it's a bad ending for her, right?
Yeah, it's a bad ending for her.
So, you know, fades to black, whatever, and fast forwards, and well, he's alive, and she's alive, and they're still living together. X amount of time has passed. He has a new job. He's a security guard somewhere. Loving that law enforcement thing. He was pretending to be a cop for a while. And now, sure enough, he has a job as an actual security guard. Right, Mike?
Yeah, he just loves wearing a uniform, I guess, you know?
It's funny, though. Now that I think about that, I almost feel like that's his little way, in his own crazy, deranged way of maybe protecting things, even though he is a mess himself. Like, you know, maybe like, why does he like law enforcement so much when he does drugs, and you know what I'm saying?
Well, you know, at the end though, I wonder if he's still on drugs. Like we kind of established that Christiane is like continuing her education, and you know.
Yeah, she seems like she looks a little better. She seems like she's going to school, you know. She comes home and she sees him, and he's shaving his face. Apparently he likes to have a clean shaved face or whatever, right? And even though he doesn't look like he needs a shave, he shaves, right?
Yeah.
And he's kind of talking to himself, right, in the mirror, and it almost reminded me of the end of Cruising, actually. Remember the end of Cruising?
It's got a real ambiguous ending at the end.
Yes.
Yeah.
Where he's looking at himself in the mirror, and he's wiping away some shaving cream, and it's just kind of over, and we see that his girlfriend has found the S&M stuff still in the apartment. Remember? That's how Cruising ends.
Cruising, yeah.
Yeah. Now this movie, he's looking at himself in the mirror. She's got some shaving cream, and we cut to Christiane, who finds a bottle of pills that look like it's his pills.
Right.
but we don't know what the fuck these pills are. And it almost looks like she's about to take them, but she doesn't take them. Like she opens it up and looks at him and puts them back. And then it cuts back to his face and the movie's over. It like Mike and I said, before we started taping that, did he did he maybe want to have that other ending where he dies and then changed his mind and filmed this additional footage?
It's a head scratcher, man. But also, I was thinking the same thing about Cruising because, it makes sense that he would also rip off Cruising. You know what I mean? It's another great 70s, dark film, crime film. But maybe riffing on the ambiguous ending of Cruising, like the ambiguity in God's Lonely Man is that, maybe these are like some prescription drugs that he has to help him.
Yeah, right. Maybe that's why he's got a job now.
Yeah.
That could be, like maybe it's the pills that are keeping him in check.
Right. The guy's definitely got some serious emotional issues too. So maybe he's taking something to even him out, like some sort of, medication. You know what I mean?
It's funny. Some of these IMDb things also liken the movie to two movies that I did not think about. Leon the Professional.
Okay.
And Lolita.
Yeah, that's an easy one though. That's like, okay, but and honestly, it never establishes him having sex with her though.
Right. So the Lolita thing only in the fact that it's kids and sex and edgy and dark. In Lolita, the main character is and wants to have sex with Lolita, so there's a difference there.
Yeah.
In Taxi Driver and in God's Lonely Man, that is not happening. But Leon, it's funny, like when that movie came out in 94, 95, at no point did I think anything was inappropriate. Years later, some people have looked at that movie with a very different lens and felt that, like, I don't know, it's kind of weird that he was with her. And I'm like, no, like what? At no point is he with her, right? I mean, in The Professional, right?
I mean, I haven't seen that movie in like 20 years, but I didn't get that impression.
Maybe it's time for me to rewatch Leon the Professional, but certainly when I watched it then, none of that came across my head. I thought it was a revenge movie about a guy who helped a young girl get revenge. The people killed her family, the cops,
Yeah,
but,
that's all I got out of it, Now, let me ask you a question. All right, they're living together in like this very domestic setting,
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that she's 18 at this point and that they're in an actual relationship, or is it still this like weird incel thing?
I think it's under a year later. I think it's only like 6 months or so later. I think she's still in high school. And I think they're still living this father-daughter-ish thing. No, I don't think so.
Wow.
That's not what I got out of it.
And he's,
I don't think that much time has passed.
Yeah, I'm so uncomfortable by this movie. I was just like, everything about it is just uncomfortable. Even that is uncomfortable. That he's a grown man's living with a teenage girl that's still in high school, and he's not related to her. I mean, aren't there like laws against stuff like that? Is that
no? But that's the whole thing. He took that's the weird '90s thing about this movie. Like, the police don't figure into this movie.
There's like, it's a lawless society they live in. You know what I mean? It's like there's no law and order at all. Like, just like people are just running wild in this movie.
And the mother hasn't sent anybody looking for her daughter because the mom's a mess. And it's just kind of like, wow.
I mean, it's almost like you can almost imagine the mother just descending into alcoholism and then just losing touch with everything too. That seems to be like the trajectory that she was on,
True. Now for the moment of truth, Mike. On our scale of Necromaniac scale of 1 to 5, what do you give God's Lonely Man?
You're going to be surprised, but I give this a 4.5.
Wow. I am surprised, as I gave it a 3.5.
Dude, I think, all right, look. Like the first time you heard Def Leppard, and you're like, this is AC/DC, But you still like Def Leppard. I mean, I love the first two Def Leppard records. You know what I mean?
I actually was reminded a bit of like a poppier Led Zeppelin, but anyway, go
Okay.
on.
For me, I listened to maybe the Mutt Lange production or something like that made me think of
Mm,
AC/DC.
mm.
And I was like, or Crocus sounds like AC/DC too, or like, metal
Okay,
rendezvous or
yeah,
something.
yeah, yeah.
And I
Uh-huh.
still like Crocus. I still enjoy their records. I love the first two Def Leppard records, but there's AC/DC too, which is like the ultimate rock band, hard rock band. Now, I feel like this is like Def Leppard, compared to AC/DC. Taxi Drivers, Highway to Hell, and and this is like the Def Leppard version of Taxi Driver, and it's got its own merits, man. I think it's very well written.
Mm.
It's definitely, yeah, it's a fucking ripoff basically, but it's different enough where you can kind of overlook some of that stuff, and the writing really shines through. I think the writing is fucking great in this thing, and I think the acting is incredible.
I gave it a 3.5. See it. It's worth seeing. It's a good film. And on the plus side is that I think it was well done
Yeah,
for a low budget film,
yeah. I mean,
um, and pretty well acted. I didn't have a ton of rewatchability.
no. It's not.
And
No, definitely not.
you know, it's not a perfect film. I feel like something happened there with the ending. And you know, it's a good film. It is worth seeing, especially if you like the oddities that Mike and I have covered throughout our tenure on the podcast. Uh, you know, yeah, I don't know. I wasn't comfortable giving it like a 4. So I like my 3.5. It's almost like the Jeff 3.5, where it's actually a little higher. Like a Jeff 3.5
Yeah,
is
no,
is actually high because it's from Jeff.
yeah,
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 yeah.
totally.
Hmm.
I just like I don't want to see this movie again because it just made me so fucking uncomfortable and I felt dirty after watching it. But like it's a powerful movie, I think,
Yes.
and it it says something too. Like there's something being expressed in this film that has, like I said, that has to do with abuse. It has to do with like lost people. It has to do with like mental illness, like all this stuff, and it's told in like such a unflinching way.
This is a very interesting not YouTube, IMDb review from 2001. Okay. Uh, you know, it's not really a pastiche or mockery, as some critics on its release argued, of Taxi Driver. Rather, it is a re-examination of the place of someone like Travis Bickle in another time. It's also based on a true story.
What?
That's what it says.
Holy shit! See, someone needs to make a fucking legit Blu-ray of this with like extras to talk about all this stuff.
Well, the DVD has some minimal behind the scenes stuff, according to what some people have said. The DVD is about 14. There's one person selling it on eBay right now for like $15, and somebody else selling it for like 16 or $17. But like that's it. There's like 2 listings for it on eBay. Um, it's a true story. I mean, how much of this is a true story? I mean, imagine all this is a true story. It's like,
Well,
whoa.
I mean, and that's the other thing too, man. It's like, why not? Like, so much crazy shit goes on in the world if you think about it. I mean, what happened in this film is not. I would believe it if I saw like one of those like Netflix like docu-series about it or something. I would believe it, for sure.
Yeah, for the indie or art house connoisseur, you will no doubt like this one. I think for people I think who might be easily triggered by some of the stuff, it is not for you.
Yeah.
But I do think a good number of the Necromaniacs will enjoy this film and ultimately uh, be happy that it was recommended. I do look forward to what listeners think of this one. I got to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, it's not for everyone. And if you go and watch the movie and your feelings get hurt, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Again,
I apologize in
it
advance.
is on YouTube. It's literally only on YouTube.
Yeah, and
God's Lonely Man.
And I urge everyone to, if you want to see it, to watch it right away because it's probably going to get yanked at some point soon.
I think it will get yanked, especially in the times that we're living. I think YouTube is, pretty clear about certain things. Although, shit, as far as Mike and I know, I mean, shit, there might be way worse full-length films on YouTube. But I was surprised that this one was on there, gotta be honest.
Yeah, but still, try to check it out before it gets pulled. That's all I can say about it.
All righty. So that was our trip to 1996. We hope you enjoyed it. If anybody has any more info about this movie, please let us know. There's not a ton of info on the internets about this one. And thank you for supporting the Necromaniacs podcast and our affiliates. Right, Mike?
That's right. And we'll talk to you guys next week. Everyone have a good week.
All right. See you next time.
should leave the house tonight and lose our digital life.